Jim Gordon here in the offices of the Richmond Sentinel. Time for another edition of Richmond Stories. Well, it's something that we like to do once a year here in Richmond at the Richmond Sentinel, where we sit down with this city's mayor. He has been in office, folks, for over 20 years. And each year we sit down and talk to him. It's a great pleasure once again to welcome the Honourable Mayor of Richmond, Malcolm Brodie. How are you, sir?
I'm fine, thanks, Jim. It's been a year. The time has flown by.
It really has, and I want to put it in perspective for people. When I say you've been in office over 20 years, to put it into perspective, I like saying this because it's so rare. You took office a few weeks after 9/11.
Yes. Right.
Before we get into today's issues, how have you found the last 23, 24 years? You obviously love what you do. People love you as mayor because, without blowing too much smoke your way, this is an unheard of thing for someone to be mayor this long in this day and age.
There are some cities that seem to change their mayor each and every term.
Yeah.
Other mayors have more longevity. Richmond has a history of longevity. Okay. Since 1973. Now think about how long that is. Yeah. I'm the third mayor. Wow. We had 17 years with Gil Blair. We had 11 years with Greg Halsey-Brandt, and I've been here for about 23 years. So it's been a good run. The beauty of longevity from the city's point of view, obviously, is that you come up with plans with mayor and council. They come up with plans, and if you can be here long enough to see those plans through, it's a big advantage. It
is, and that's always, in my mind, a great testament to a mayor that they're implementing things that may occur long after they're gone. You're that one different thing because you're here. It must be gratifying to see some of the things, say, 8, 9, 10 years ago that you were pushing for now being seen.
Yes, some of the initiatives are short-lived, but yes, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years for a project is not a long time. I mean, look at the Stephenson Community Center. Yeah. We've been talking about that at least 10, 12 years, and it takes a long time for the initiative to build, to get all the constituent parts together and then go ahead with it.
Lots to talk about, as we do every year, sir. Let's talk about an issue that was important and top of people's minds a year ago, still is, and that's housing and affordability. How are you ensuring stable and affordable housing for the residents? And talk about how the council and you are trying to address this. It's something, as I said, a year ago we were talking about. We still are.
We still are. The cities are growing. The number of people coming into the cities is growing dramatically. Immigration is very strong. And so there's two questions there that we kind of lump them together, but it's important that we think of them separately. First of all is simply having enough housing units for the people who want to live here to have places to live. Mm-hmm. And secondly, the market has taken the price of housing up so dramatically that affordable housing, or housing to be affordable, it's a contradiction. I mean, they're really, when you're talking about an average house price or unit price here in Richmond is something like $1.5 million. How many people have the money for that? Yeah. So affordability is a big deal, as is just the straight number of units.
Yeah, because it's a phrase that gets used a lot, but I've always found it challenging because it's so subjective, isn't it? That, as you said, some people can afford $1 million condo or home. Most people can't. The thing that goes almost hand in hand or right behind housing and affordability is homelessness. Every town and city in the Lower Mainland, the province, is dealing with it more so than probably any other time in your long reign as mayor. Talk about what you guys are doing to address this as well. I know that you have been pushing hard for this. Talk about some of the things that our viewers may not know about, but are success stories.
I remember when I was growing up and hearing my parents and grandparents talking about the days of the Depression and the hobo cities, and they'd have whole encampments of people who had no home. And then it really was, by the time we were talking about it, really there was little evidence of any such thing. In the last number of years, for a whole host of different reasons, and you'd have to be a sociologist to discover why, but for a whole host of reasons, the number of people who have no home has grown and grown. And so that's necessitated our city council, even though strictly speaking it's a provincial responsibility, we have a duty to assist in any way we can. So whereas 10 years ago we didn't have a shelter, now we have a shelter. During the winter months where the weather gets cold and people don't want to be outside, we have a couple of centers where they can come in from the elements at night. We have the 2 housing units for people who have no home. We have a project called Stories on Granville near City Hall, where various social agencies have housing. Probably you would say those people, a lot of them are hard to house. And so there's this whole area that we've had to take a look at and be involved in, and the taxpayers of course have supported it for us to assist those who simply have no home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's almost too like there's so many different subcategories within that we were talking about this off camera before you came down, about just there's people that have, say, mental issues, but there's also people that, say, are working full-time jobs but still can't afford it. So there's a lot of different categories you have to deal with.
There are people who are living in those tents or living in the shelters, whatever, who do have a job. They, for a variety of different reasons. And the reasons, as you have reflected, can be very, very complex. Substance abuse is a big one, or substance use at least. Mental health issues, and it goes from there. The rationale and the reasons behind it can be very, very complex. Mm-hmm. Again, the city has had to do what we can to assist those who are in this urgent need.
Another thing that has been consistent in the 4 years since we first started doing these talks is community safety.
Yep.
No community is always 100% safe, but I know that, and you and I talked about this a number of times, where the lockdown, COVID, a number of other factors has led to maybe things not feeling as safe, but I know that you guys are tackling this as well. You guys approved a development in the Hamilton neighborhood. You've incorporated more community police office. RCMP you work closely with. Again, for our viewers out there that are asking those questions, do you find you're making progress on that as well?
Well, if you look at the statistics, I think that we are getting safer as time goes along, but people need to feel safe as well. I think the big evolution or one of them, in public safety is the fact that if a person is acting out or committing a crime of some sort in the public, traditionally the police come along, lock the person up, or do whatever. And now, I mean, that will still happen, of course, but very often we have a program called Fox 80, and that's where an RCMP officer goes along with a medical clinician who is specially trained in such things. Both of them have the special training, and they understand that there's a mental health issue to what they're seeing. And so the treatment, it can be the traditional incarceration, but it could be all kinds of other things of a more call it more sensitive and more intuitive nature. Similarly for the youth, instead of just saying that that's a bad kid and he's acting out, let's talk about it and let's figure out exactly why, a little more about why this is happening, and go from there.
Yeah, because since we last talked, literally after we last talked, tell our viewers a little bit more about this Yankee 30 Youth Program, which you launched, as I said, just after we last talked.
Well, it's a partnership between the city and the province and the RCMP, where, like the Fox 80 program, where you have the clinician and the RCMP together, you have various people of a social worker nature, call it, working with the police to look at a situation and realize that it's not just a straight person who wants to commit a criminal act. It's for people to understand the situation better, and also to have an avenue for the person acting out in a certain way to get assistance and to get past that kind of behavior that's so antisocial.
When you first took office, not that this wasn't a topic of discussion, but last time we talked, I think the year two, we were getting more updates from you on climate change and the proactive approach you take. Again, when you take office, back in 2001, the fall of that year, I don't know how high up on the list that might have been as a priority, but it certainly has become one each year in the last years that you and I have been talking. Can you talk and address some of the what you guys are doing? You're very proactive, as I've said. With this?
Well, certainly the climate change, the situation, it was known. And the feeling was that it was caused by humans. And we had to deal with it, both in the sense of the results of climate change and also what was leading to climate change. So probably the biggest factor that you would come up with is the need, being an island city, being maybe at sea level or maybe a meter above sea level, depending on where you are. We have to take steps to make sure that we have the flood protection. And so that has been a constant, but it's evolving to a higher level all the time, that we're taking flood protection very, very seriously. We have started on the long-term programs to raise all the dikes all the way around the city. It's a big job. 49 kilometers of dikes, and so we have the dikes to hold the water out, and we also have, for the water that comes from the sky or wherever, we also have the pumps. So we have 39 pumps and pump stations all around the island, and so that keeps us high and dry. You may remember when we've had some of the catastrophic flooding, the atmospheric rivers of the last few years. When we've had those, Richmond has really remained pretty high and dry. A little bit of issue, but basically we were able to deal with it, whereas some were not nearly as well protected. We have the incentive that we know that we are at risk of flooding. Right. And if we don't do something proactive, we will pay the price right in the near term, one way or the other.
Yeah, it must really reinforce your determination and your focus on this subject when you see something like 2 years ago in the Fraser Valley. That seemed to be, from a layman's viewpoint, very unprepared. And so when you see that, how does that reinforce you and the group?
Oh, that's just feeding the beast, as it were. We look at those pictures and we realize here in Richmond, that could have been us. That could have been us with all that water, different circumstances, slightly different causation, but basically not being prepared for water and flooding is a very big mistake for us. And so I think that we've been more proactive than anywhere else, certainly in this region or in the province, in terms of making sure we are protected. Delta would probably be in the same category. We just know that we are in the eye of the storm and we've got to be protected or pay the price.
Yeah, as you alluded to, just knowing your own vulnerabilities, right?
Yes,
where
exactly.
you are located.
Exactly.
You released a community energy emissions plan to guide the city to achieve 50% reduction in GHG emissions by 2030.
Right.
Talk to our viewers a bit about that.
Well, I think provincially, the province and every city are coming up with their own plans as to how to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, which are so damaging to the environment. And so we said, okay, we start with the base of 2007. And by 2030, we want to have reduced our emissions by 50%. And by 2050, we want to reduce them down to zero. That's a tall order, but we are very much taking steps of various kinds in that vein. Probably one of the biggest programs, and one of the ones that I'm really very proud of, is we have been working since the 1990s to densify the city center. That's where we plan to take the growth of population. And so the decision was made probably a decade ago that we would use district energy. So you're using non-fossil based fuels for your energy source, ground source water. Maybe even we've got the sewage plant at the south foot of Gilbert Road. Mm-hmm. We got the pipes going to that. They emit a great deal of energy, especially heat. So we can use that. So there's all these things that we can do in the sense of hooking the new developments up to district energy. And so in the last year, there were 2 more buildings that were hooked up, and so we're now, I think it's about 60 buildings or so that are hooked up to district energy. In the next decades, it's going to be tenfold more than that. So all the new buildings you're seeing around, they're all being heated and cooled by non-fossil based energy sources.
Let's talk in that vein, along that line, about infrastructure, something else we talked about last year. Any updates since summer of 2023 when we met? Probably one of the biggest decisions we made, and it's been a long time coming. We were looking for our public works yard, which is on Linus Lane and Westminster Highway. Mm-hmm. We know that it is, because it was set up 25 years, probably 25, 30 years ago. Right. And so if you look at it now, it's inefficiently set up. It can be more environmentally friendly, better use of space, all the rest of it. We looked at a couple different sites where we would want to relocate the public works yard. We came up with the plan that we're going to leave it just where it is. We can set it up better. We can consolidate the activities there, make it more efficient. And having made that decision, the beauty of it is now we know that the investment in that site is worthwhile. So I can see that it's going to be a very good thing, located right where it is. And of course, in the corner of that is the recycling depot. Mm-hmm. That is something, when we talk about climate and climate change and the environment, that is something that grows and grows every single year. It used to be 4 days a week. Now it's 7 days a week that we have that place open. We have more deliveries there of more products and more people than ever before. We've won awards for the recycling depot, and it's been used as a model for many other cities. One of the things that we've talked about before, and I guess when times are tough, things that can be caught or moved to the back burner, arts, festivals, to get people involved, culture events. But one of the things I love about your city here is that it really has kept that vibrant and alive. Yeah, there was a brief period where we couldn't do anything. But talk about some of the things you've done. There's lots going on here all year round.
Well, we did suffer in that vein. We suffered when we had the pandemic. Some of the events could be continued virtually. Most of them we had to put it on hold for the time being, but now we're back to full-blown events. Mm-hmm. The Stevenson Salmon Festival, which we put on in conjunction with the Stevenson Community Center, that's back up to the full-day celebration. We have the 2-day Maritime Festival to celebrate the tradition of the maritime industry here in the city of Richmond. That's a 2-day event. That is back on and very much alive. We have the Children's Art Festival. We have Doors Open. We have the Cherry Blossom Festival. So there's so many different activities that we have here in Richmond. All of them are free to the user and family friendly and lots of fun.
Yeah, I want to mention too, one thing that you've done very well is to attract very big events. I'm just citing one here now that you had the Canadian Adult Recreational Hockey Association here, the World Cup, 1,600 participants. I mean, that's just fantastic promotion for the city.
That was enormous. That was truly enormous. And that was supposed to be held in 2020. It got canceled because of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. So I said 2020. I think it may have been 2021, but so it was postponed from 2021 to 2022, got postponed again, and it was held finally in 2023. It was recreational hockey from adult hockey from really literally around the world. They even had a team from the Ukraine that was there, which was a very sentimental favorite. Of course, we didn't let the Richmond team beat them.
Sentiment can only go so far, right?
Exactly. This is serious, but no, we had a tremendous time, and you had 1,700 players, plus all their entourages and all the people they brought in and all the services they used. So there's always the economic factor to anything you bring in, anything you put on. But much more importantly than that, I think, was the fact that we were able to stage it, host all these people, and start to come out of that pandemic back to feeling normal.
How important is having a world-class international airport in your city? I mean, that's a gateway for the world to come here. Have you seen a great increase, say, back to compared to when you first started in office 23 years ago?
Well, that's something that has evolved, of course, over time. The Vancouver International Airport is the largest employer or employment center in the city of Richmond. There's something like 30,000 jobs that are at the airport or directly airport related. And it's growing. It continues to grow. I think if you ask the airport people, they talk about not only the growth in passengers, where they're bringing it back to pre-pandemic levels. They had a good year last year, but there's been a growth in cargo as well. All the FedExes and UPS, Canada Post has a major facility out on Sea Island. Amazon is talking about it, all these logistics facilities. So that is very much of a growing enterprise. And of course, it's the kind of enterprise that cities would die to have. I mean, when we talk about location and the importance of location here in the city of Richmond, you talk first of all, proximity to the airport, proximity to the highways, proximity to Vancouver, to farther south to the border, rail connections and all that. It gives an added edge to Richmond that others may have a small airport, but this one is the real deal.
Yeah. And there's sometimes a perception with cities and government that they're not moving things fast enough in terms of helping businesses get moving. I'm looking at a stat here. The city issued building permits with an overall construction value exceeding $900 million. Things like that are important little data points to throw out to people.
Right, and the problem, I give credit to the province because, and the federal government, because they've been giving money not only for projects, but they've been giving money to the cities under various programs to assist us with our process. The idea being you can build more houses more quickly, but besides by just building them, if you can process your applications more quickly, more efficiently and effectively, you will then also have more living units as well. So that's been part of the process. Some of the more routine permits you can now apply for online. A simple plumbing permit that doesn't require a lot of staff analysis. You can go online now, you can apply for it 24/7. And we're expanding that program because many of the permits are more complicated and they take staff review. So we're extending it, and it's complicated, but we're getting there so that we can issue the permits again without the people having to spend a lot of time coming back and forth from City Hall.
One of the other strong points I find from a communication angle, which is my business, is that the city is very proactive when it comes to communicating. I mean, you're very strong on all the social media. You've got something that you launched since we last talked called Let's Talk Richmond. Talk to our viewers a bit about that.
That's something that has grown over the years. It's a internet-based application where people on any range of subjects can just send in their comments and we get them. So I regularly get hard copies of what people are saying as they're sending things through Let's Talk Richmond. Additionally, if we have a particular program or initiative that we want the feedback on to consult with the public, we put it on Let's Talk Richmond and get specific information on that particular initiative. And so it's very helpful, but it's buttressed that and our website, which gets millions of views, like over 4 million views per year. And then you take all the social media, the Facebook and what was Twitter and
X, they're going,
and all
Instagram,
that.
LinkedIn, you've got a good solid following that. And as you mentioned, new website was launched since we last spoke.
Right. So it's been reorganized. I won't say that it's exactly new information, but it's better organized. We always try and make it user-friendly so you can quickly and effectively go to the city website, richmond.ca, just go in there and you can quickly click and get to your answer.
One of the things that you do well, and I think I would credit this as one of the reasons why you are in office this long. As a citizen, I want to see my mayor. I want to see him out. Now, there's things you have to go there officially, but I last saw you at that big gala in Vancouver for Succession. You came over, we were talking for a few minutes. You obviously like being out there, but I think citizens of this town like seeing you at a variety of different events. Am I right on that?
I think historically the mayor has been expected to do that, fulfill that kind of a role. And I can say that my predecessors, Greg Halsebrandt, Gil Blair, were very, very good at that. So I spend countless numbers of hours and days per year at the events. In some ways there's similarities, but all of them have their unique charm. And so it's a matter of just enjoying what that particular group has put into this particular event and how they've made it different, and just enjoying that to see the creativity that you find.
Let's wrap things up as we always do with looking forward. I know I always tease you about this, about you staying in office. I'm not going to ask you that question again. First time in 4 or 5 years. But let's talk about things that you are working on. Completion of certain infrastructure projects. Give me your top 2 or 3 that, as we move forward, that you are really focused on.
Okay. I'll give you one from TransLink, and that's the Capstan Station.
Right.
Okay. That was a particularly novel approach. We knew that North Richmond was redeveloping. We went to the major landholders in the area, the Pinnacles, Concord, Pacific, and a few of the others, went to them, and they agreed that they would levy a fee per unit, which would ultimately be put towards the Capstan Station. It was up to us to raise that money. So once we had about $30 million, now it's being built. That's not the total bill for it, but it's largely funded by the growth in that particular area, because it enhances that particular area. So that should be finished this year. From the city's point of view, you would talk about the Stevenson Community Center and Library. We talked about the fact that that's been long on the go, and we have been talking about that and envisioning that with the community. It's almost a $100 million project. If you go on Moncton Street by there, you'll see that the shovels are in the ground and it's starting to come out of the ground. And the third project I'll talk about is provincial. And that is the George Massey Tunnel. We keep the pressure on that project to make sure that it doesn't go off the rails, and nobody's talking about a bridge anymore, and just to keep focused on that. Our vision is that the existing tunnel, which is coming to the end of its useful life, about 400 meters upriver, will be the new tunnel, and that the latest projection is it'll be about 2028, 2030 by the time that is open. But the Stevenson Highway overpass is now being completed. That has to be twinned as part of the project. There was bus improvements further north as well. And we're working with Hydro, because one of the beauties of, I say beauties sarcastically, of the whole bridge idea was that they were going to have these transmission towers instead of having the wires, the transmission wires, right in as part of the project.
Okay.
So we want Hydro to commit to putting those transmission lines in the tunnel like they are now. So there's a lot of facets to all those projects, but those are three of the ones that come to me right off the top.
Always a pleasure to sit and talk with you, sir. We should do it a little more than once a year, but we appreciate your time. We should say to our viewers who are sitting in your office, basically, this council office, part of the city of Richmond here in the main building. And thank you very much again, sir. He's been the mayor since October of 2001, folks, and he joins us here, Mayor Malcolm Brodie, on the Richmond Sentinel Video Hour.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.